Let me tell you something brutally honest. The moment you stop chasing is the moment everything changes. Because what truly shakes someone is not your presence, it's your absence. It's not the messages you send, it's the silence you hold. It's not the way you love them out loud, it's the way you stop showing up when they thought you always would. You want to know when they really start missing you. It's not when you walk away. It's when they realize you're not coming back. And by the time they understand that, it's already too late. This is where the power shifts. This is where people who once underestimated your value suddenly can't stop replaying every moment they took for granted. They'll scroll through old messages, revisit memories they swore didn't matter, and feel that emptiness getting louder with every passing day. Because silence is not weakness. It's power, it's clarity, it's the loudest message you'll ever send without saying a single word. And here's the part that most will never admit. They don't miss you at first. They miss the way you made them feel. And once they realize no one else makes them feel that way, the craving begins. It doesn't knock softly. It hits like a wave. That's why what I'm about to tell you in this video will change the way you move forever. This isn't about games. This is about understanding human psychology at its core. So don't blink, don't scroll, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why your silence is far more dangerous than your words, and why they'll end up missing you when you finally stop trying. People imagine that missing someone begins the moment they walk away, but that's not how human attachment works. The mind doesn't register loss when something is still available. It registers it when it suddenly can't access what it once believed was guaranteed. That's why women don't start missing a man when he first pulls back. They start missing him when his energy, his presence, his essence no longer orbit their world. That's when it hits, not with noise, not with a bang, but with a cold, quiet silence that shakes the ego. When you were present, she didn't have to work for your attention. She didn't have to question your availability. Your messages came like clockwork, your voice felt familiar, and your presence was a steady backdrop to her life. She could ignore it, neglect it, even take it for granted, because it was always there. You were, in her mind, part of the furniture, not something to earn, not something to fear losing. But here's the raw truth. Nothing is valued more than what is suddenly no longer accessible. When a man detaches without drama, something very powerful happens. At first, she may not even notice. She might mistake your silence for another emotional game. She might tell herself she's in control, that she has the upper hand. But slowly, reality starts to change. The absence becomes louder than any words you could ever say. The void you leave behind isn't just about your physical presence. It's about the energy that once wrapped around her. The reassurance, the safety, the familiarity. That energy was feeding her ego even when she pretended not to care. And now it's gone. It's easy to underestimate someone who's always available. People get used to being wanted. They get used to the constant chase, the emotional safety net. But when the one who used to care suddenly stops trying, it creates an emotional imbalance. The ego begins to panic. The mind starts replaying old moments, conversations, messages. The woman who once ignored your calls suddenly feels the silence screaming in the background of her life. She doesn't just miss you as a person, she misses the emotional security of being wanted. And here's where the psychological shift happens. The human brain is wired to crave certainty. We find comfort in patterns, in knowing someone will be there even when we don't value them fully. So when that pattern is broken, when the person who once showed up simply doesn't anymore, the mind goes into withdrawal. It's not just an emotional reaction, it's neurological. The dopamine that was once fed by your attention suddenly crashes. And that crash is when missing you starts to burn. The silence you give is more powerful than any speech you could ever make. It forces reflection. It turns all the ignored texts and brushed off moments into sharp memories that now cut differently. She'll remember the way you used to respond immediately, the way you cared, the way you made her feel chosen. And it will sting, not because you did something dramatic, but because you did nothing at all. Nothing is louder than a man who no longer needs to explain himself. In the early days of your withdrawal, she may play it cool. She may post more, act unbothered, convince herself she's unaffected, but detachment isn't loud, it's strategic, it's steady, it's quiet strength. And as the days turn into weeks, she begins to realize that your absence isn't temporary, it's real. That's when the panic sets in. That's when the craving intensifies, because people don't realize what they've lost when you walk away shouting. They realize it when you walk away silently and never turn back. What's important to understand is this: missing someone is not about love alone. It's about the sudden void left in the emotional ecosystem of someone's life. When you were around, she could feel important without having to give anything in return. When you're gone, she has to sit with the silence and recognize her role in pushing away the very thing that made her feel significant. And no ego is comfortable with that kind of mirror. This is why your absence must carry more weight than your presence ever did. You don't have to beg. You don't have to prove your value. You simply need to remove the energy she believed she would always have, because nothing is missed more than what was once taken for granted. And in that moment, when she finally feels the void, not just in her heart, but in her identity, she will realize something she never saw when you were right in front of her. She will realize that your presence wasn't just a part of her routine. It was the quiet foundation of her emotional security. When that foundation is gone, she doesn't just miss you. She starts to crave the certainty, the safety, the feeling of being desired. And by the time she understands that, it's usually too late. So let your silence speak where your words were ignored. Let your absence teach the lesson your presence could never make her see. Because the moment she realizes you're not coming back is the moment she finally understands your worth. There's a moment in every dynamic where words lose their weight, when explanations no longer matter, when chasing only pushes someone further away, and when trying to make them see your worth actually makes them value you less. That's the moment silence becomes more powerful than any speech, any text, any emotional plea. People think communication always means talking, explaining, proving. But the truth is, sometimes silence is the only language strong enough to shift power, to rebuild respect, and to remind someone what they're really losing. A woman will not miss the man who keeps explaining his worth. She won't feel the depth of his absence if he's constantly trying to prove it to her. She will only start to feel that void when he stops trying. When the man who used to argue, defend, justify, or beg suddenly goes quiet, it unsettles her on a level that words never could. It forces her to sit alone with herself without the distraction of your validation. And that's when the mind starts turning against the ego. That's when the silence becomes deafening. You need to understand something crucial here. When a man argues or pleads, he unintentionally keeps feeding her sense of control. She knows she's still the center of his focus. She knows he still cares. But silence takes that power away. Silence is unpredictable. It's not submissive. It's calm, centered, and unshakable. It says, without saying anything, I don't need to convince you anymore. And that message pierces deeper than any emotional outburst ever could. This is where many people go wrong. They think being silent means being weak or passive, but real silence, intentional silence, is not about avoidance. It's about power. It's about showing that your energy is no longer available to someone who doesn't respect it. It's about withdrawing from the emotional game without needing to announce your exit. It's about letting the absence of your words speak volumes. Women are intuitive. They can sense the difference between silence born from weakness and silence born from strength. When your silence comes from pain, she may ignore it. But when it comes from clarity, when it's calm, clean, and final, it disrupts her emotional balance. Because now she's not sure what's going on in your mind. She's not sure if you're coming back. She's not sure if she still holds that position in your world. And uncertainty is a far stronger teacher than your explanations ever were. The reason silence is so effective is because it shifts the emotional burden. When you're the one talking, chasing, proving, she's in control. She has the luxury of being indifferent. But when you fall silent, the weight of reflection shifts to her. She's now the one who starts thinking, replaying, questioning. She starts remembering your words, your actions, your presence. She starts wondering why you're not fighting anymore. And slowly, the silence becomes a mirror, one that shows her how much she underestimated your worth. You have to realize that begging for someone to understand your value never works. Respect isn't built through convincing, it's built through boundaries. And silence is one of the strongest boundaries you can ever create. When you no longer give someone unlimited access to your energy, they start to see its value. Because silence creates scarcity, and what's scarce becomes desirable. This doesn't mean you become cold or emotionless. It means you rise above the noise. You stop giving your energy away to someone who treats it like it's endless. You stop trying to force clarity on someone who refuses to see, and you let silence do what words can't. The shift happens quietly. At first, she might act unaffected. She might play it cool, pretend like she doesn't notice your silence. But that's temporary. As time passes, the weight of what's missing grows heavier. The lack of your energy starts echoing through the empty spaces she thought she could fill with distraction. She starts to notice how peaceful your presence was, how secure your attention felt. And that realization doesn't come because you explained it. It comes because you didn't. The most dangerous kind of man to lose is not the one who argues, it's the one who goes silent with grace. Because that silence doesn't just create space, it creates mystery. And mystery pulls harder than desperation ever could. So instead of exhausting yourself with explanations that fall on deaf ears, let your silence speak. Because silence doesn't beg, it doesn't demand, it doesn't chase. It simply shows the other person that your value was never dependent on their validation. And that's the moment she begins to understand what she took for granted. That's when missing you becomes real. Not when you try to make her see it, but when you stop trying altogether. Let your silence be your loudest statement. Because in a world where everyone is busy talking, the one who can hold silence with strength always holds the power. What most people don't understand is that when a woman starts missing a man, she's not always missing him directly. She's missing the way she felt when she was around him. She's missing the emotional safety, the certainty, the way her ego felt validated without her even having to ask for it. And that's where the real power of your absence lies. It's not just the man she longs for. It's the version of herself that existed in your presence. That's why missing someone isn't just emotional, it's deeply psychological. When you were present, she may not have acknowledged the emotional weight of what you gave her. Your attention was there, your energy was steady, your effort was visible. She could text whenever she wanted, call whenever she felt like it, and you'd respond. She didn't think about what it would feel like not to have that access anymore. But the human mind attaches itself to patterns, and when those patterns break, the absence hits like a wave. Not because she suddenly loves more, but because she realizes how much she was silently depending on what you provided. She doesn't just miss your voice. She misses the calm in your voice that made her feel safe. She doesn't just miss your texts. She misses the emotional validation they carried. She doesn't just miss your time. She misses the way your time made her feel valued. And when that feeling is gone, it's not easy to replace. That's why your silence, your detachment, your withdrawal shakes her deeper than she expects. She thought she could live without you, but she didn't consider she'd also be living without the emotional high she got from being chosen by you. What people rarely admit is that validation is addictive. We build emotional dependencies on the people who make us feel wanted. And when that source of validation disappears, the ego goes into survival mode. She'll replay the moments when you made her feel special. She'll think about the times she knew you were fully invested. And every replay will remind her that no one else makes her feel quite the same. Because it's not just about who you were, it's about how she felt when she was with you. That's why she can't just move on the way she thought she could. This is also why chasing never works. When you chase, you give away the very energy that made you magnetic in the first place. But when you step back, when you remove that constant flow of attention, she's left with herself. And suddenly, she has to face the emptiness she tried to cover up with your energy. That emptiness isn't about love, it's about the loss of emotional supply. And when someone's ego gets used to being fed, the absence feels like withdrawal. That's when the missing becomes intense. Not because she can't live without you, but because she can't replicate the way you made her feel. The most impactful people in our lives are not always the loudest ones. They're the ones who made us feel something no one else did. And when their presence disappears, their silence echoes. She'll try to find distractions. She'll try to convince herself she's fine. But late at night, when everything quiets down, it's not your name that haunts her. It's the feeling she can't recreate, the feeling of being truly wanted, fully seen, deeply desired. Here's what makes this even more powerful. People rarely realize how valuable a presence is when it's easy to access. They only recognize it when it becomes rare, when it's gone, when it no longer belongs to them. That's why your absence hurts deeper than your presence ever did. Because now, it's not guaranteed anymore. It's no longer hers to lean on. This is why boundaries matter more than begging. When you choose silence over convincing, distance over chasing, and dignity over desperation, you give her the space to feel the full weight of what she's losing. And that weight doesn't come from guilt. It comes from a psychological craving for what she can't have anymore. She doesn't just want you back. She wants that feeling back. But by then, something shifts. The power dynamic is no longer the same. You don't need to manipulate anyone to realize your worth. You just need to remove the emotional access they took for granted. Because when someone has to live without what they never appreciated, they begin to understand its value more than any speech could ever teach them. At the end of the day, people don't crave faces. They crave emotions. They crave feelings. And when those feelings are tied to your presence, your absence becomes unforgettable. That's the moment she stops seeing you as just another man and starts realizing you were an emotional experience she can't replicate. And that is your real power, not in proving your value, but in letting your absence reveal it. Because the deepest kind of missing isn't about losing a person, it's about losing the way they made you feel. And once that feeling is gone, nothing else quite feels the same again.